Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Tim and today we're going to find out what is the best differential ratio for your E46 330 CI manual. If it's a manual, they all came with this differential right here, a 293. Right here I have what is commonly referred to as the poor man's supercharger, a 338. But is it really a poor man's supercharger? Is it better than the 293? Now I installed this 293 here in the previous video because most people go from 293 to a 338, and although I bought the car with the 338, I felt like it would be a better comparison to start out with the 293 and then swap in the 338. So I swapped this differential here in, and then I set out and did a lot of tests on what this differential here was capable of. I recorded the data using this Draggy device here and then an accompanying app for your phone to actually check what this is reporting. And doing that method here, I made a 50 to 110 kilometer per hour sprint where I stay in the same gear, third gear. This test here shows how much power the differential is transmitting to the ground. I also did a 0 to 100 kilometer per hour test. This test here though is a bit more tricky, being that with the 293 diff here, you only need to shift once, while the 338 differential here, you actually have to shift twice to be able to hit 100 kilometers per hour. I also recorded the RPMs I was cruising at various speeds, and if you have a 5-speed and you're doing the speed limit on the highway, you'll be cruising at around 2700 RPM, whereas if you have the 6-speed, you'll be cruising at around 2350 RPM. The results from the 293 diff here came in at a 50 to 110 at 7.2 seconds. That's very respectable in my opinion, and honestly the car doesn't feel slow at all. The 0 to 100 kilometers per hour came in at 6.52, which I also find to be very good, being that BMW says that the 6-speed should be able to do it in a 6.5, and being that this engine here has covered 200,000+ kilometers, that means that the engine is still somewhat sound and healthy. And having done all those tests, I then set out and installed the 338 differential here. In with that. Now this isn't a apples to apples comparison because I honestly have converted this to a limited slip differential as well. That won't affect the 50 to 110 kilometer per hour sprints, but it will affect the 0 to 100 kilometer per hour sprint. So having tested the 338 versus the 293, I can say without a doubt that there's something to it when people call it the poor man's supercharger. Now, the results for the 50 to 110, which is probably the most important one, the one that says something about how much faster does the car actually get, that one took off a full second off the 293's average. Quite impressive, really, and it really transformed how the car feels and drives. 0 to 100 kilometers per hour here. Now, the best I were able to do was 6.56, but again, this is a limited slip converter. 25% lockup, I believe Racing Diff calls it, but either way, I found out when I installed this in a video where also we're testing some headers, again using this draggy dongle here, that this differential here, the conversion, made me shave off 0.2 seconds by just being able to launch with a higher RPM without it just resulting in a lot of wheel spin. So a more truthful comparison would probably be somewhere around 6.76 seconds if you don't have the limited slip conversion installed or any other type of limited slip conversion done to it. Actually, it's somewhat close, and being that I have to shift gears twice with the 338 differential, it's kind of impressive that it's almost under the right circumstances, equally as fast as the 293 diff. So the RPMs wise, now if you have a 5-speed, in my opinion, 3100 is a little bit high when you're cruising at the freeway, not breaking any speed limits. Whereas with the 6-speed, I was hovering around 2650 to 2700 RPMs or so. And one thing I have noticed too about these two ratios here is that this one here, you can actually cruise with a lower RPM. The torque multiplication increase from this 338 rear end here means that you can kind of just leave it in 6th, and even if there's an incline and you have cruise control activated, it will actually just kind of do its own thing and not make any fuss about it. Whereas 1200 RPM in the 293 differential, it'll hesitate doing it, and as we all know, that's not healthy for the engine. So with city driving, I drive with fewer RPMs with this, and city driving is even more relaxed, both in terms of being that you can have fewer RPMs, but also that you don't do as much shifting in the city because you can kind of just leave it in the same gear and it will just sort itself out, so to say. So, but surely there must be some kind of compromise between these two here. There actually is. This here is a 3:15 ratio. Numerically, this sits right in the middle between these two ratios here. And that makes it super interesting to see how well this then behaves and performs, because I kind of feel like that I really like the highway capabilities of this differential here, the 293, but I also really like the acceleration capabilities of this 338, and that leaves room for this 315. Maybe we can actually find some sort of middle ground, some sort of do it all differential. At least that's what we're gonna try. We're gonna try and install this, do the same test, and then we'll see how it compares to these two here. But right off the bat, I can see that the input flange here is different. I'll need to figure out how to swap the input flange to here, but some way we'll have this installed and then we'll be able to maybe find the best diff for this car here. This is honestly super exciting. Let's start by just removing the loose scales here. We'll just mark this here, so we have that as a guideline. Yeah, no oil. Oh, and it smells really old. .06 to 0.1 millimeter. So this is in the upper range, but it's still within spec. Gave it a bit too much, but these are used bearings and this is just a test. So I think this will be fine. Let's try and see what the rolling resistance actually is now though. Still takes some force to get it going, but once it's going, the amount is exactly the same. Somewhere between a half Newton meter and a full Newton meter. Spec would be roughly between 1 and 2 Newton meters. Now would also be the easiest time to add some oil. I don't think there's really that much left though, but let's see here. Here we have some straight 74. That should do as well, and that's almost half a liter. It should have 1 liter in total, 75, 140, and here there's 0.3 liters. I think these here combined, you can see this is a slightly thicker, but it's okay with it being slightly thicker. The main thing is that it isn't too thin or severely too thick. And it's really just a thin layer, as you don't want the leftovers going inside. Then we need to clean these frets here to this size. Yeah, the easiest way is to give this a small cut. This one isn't the best thread, but it will be. See, now I can run it in. Diff somewhat cleaned, threads are cleaned, new flange on, and a mismatch of various oils filled. Now it's time to actually install this beast. Oh. Oh. Heavy. Did I just fuck up? I actually think these output shafts here are different as well. Oh, they're a tiny bit smaller. Oh, okay, no biggie. We'll just have to remove them. Yep. Quick note, don't do as I do. Before we actually swap this in, I need to clean this surface here. Threads seem fine, but the surfaces at least, they need to be cleaned. All right, mating surface cleaned, threads cleaned. Then I really hope that we're actually able to use this. Otherwise, I'm going to have to terminate this experiment, being that I will then need new axles. And if you know anything about BMW, you know how it sucks replacing axles. So rubber mallet. Fuck me. The other side's going to be more problematic. It seems like there's no room to get this output shaft out because of this axle here. So there. In my eagerness to actually go and test this, I even forgot this locking ring here. Good, 95 Newton meters. You tighten these down first, and then 175 Newton meters for the rear one. And then 85 Newton meter for this. And I believe it was 55 Newton meters or so for these here. Everything's in place, so let's let the games begin, really. So I'm back from having tested the 315 diff, and I'm kind of sorry to report that the swap just doesn't make any sense. Having done the same tests here, I had an average of 6.8 seconds from 50 to 110 kilometers per hour. And a 0 to 100 of 7.06 seconds. So if you do have a 293 diff, swapping for a 315 will not make it much faster in gear, but it'll make it a lot slower in the 0 to 100 kilometers per hour. And swapping from a 338 to a 315, if you were to do that, it will be substantially slower everywhere, really. And the RPMs honestly won't be that much different either between the two. Also, the 315 diff is not a direct swap. It's not hard at all to swap the input and output flanges, as you just seen in the video here, but it does make it so that you will have a harder time selling your old diff because you just cannibalized it. So take that into account as well, that it's not a direct swap. So the old diff will be somewhat unsellable if you ever were to go and sell it. As my tests have shown here, it just doesn't really make any sense, and honestly the diff feels a lot slower than the 338, although the difference shouldn't be that high. It kind of feels like just a 293 in-gear acceleration, but it does have all the drawbacks that the 293 doesn't have. So really just skip the 315. And I think that also boils it down to when it comes to what is the better diff for this car. Well, if you like the stock style of driving and the sweet highway capabilities that it has, the 293 will work very well, honestly. Whereas if you want to slap on a supercharger, but like me can't afford it, the 338 will kind of mimic that, only you'll have a bit more RPMs doing so, but it definitely does serve a purpose, that's for sure. All right, that's it for this video here. I hope you found it helpful or interesting, and if you did, please consider liking or subscribing. Thank you for watching. Bye.